Spiritual Awakening, Volume 2 of the Spiritual Counsels of St. Paisios of Mount Athos, is published by the Holy Monastery Evangelist John the Theologian, Sureti, Thessaloniki, Greece. English edition 2008. Prologue. The Blessed Elder Paisios began speaking to us about the difficult years ahead as early as 1980. He often said that we too might experience many of the events described in the book of Revelation. His purpose, of course, was to instill in us a positive concern. Footnote: positive or good concern is the good restlessness and anguish for the good struggle. The person struggles, observes himself, recognizes what obstructs his spiritual progress, expresses concern, asks for help, and does spiritual work. To continue. Instill in us a positive concern so that we may intensify our spiritual struggle, resist the spirit of indifference, which he had seen slipping treacherously even into the ranks of monasticism, overcome self-love, and combat our weaknesses in order to strengthen our prayer. Our weaknesses, he used to say, weaken our prayer, and we can neither help ourselves nor the people we pray for. Wireless communications become useless, and if the wireless is down, we will be defeated by the enemy. Footnote: throughout his counsels, the elder made frequent references to wireless communications, meaning, of course, our contact with God through prayer. He was fond of this metaphor, having served during his youth as a wireless operator in the Greek army. To continue. The overall prologue of the first volume, entitled With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, features a comprehensive account of the origin, selection, and compilation of the material contained in the series, The Spiritual Counsels of the Elder Paisios of Mount Athos. In this present Volume 2 of the series, entitled Spiritual Awakening, we have included themes concerning the present-day reality. These themes call upon us to be in constant vigilance and readiness, preparing us for the difficult situations that we may confront one day. We have already realized what the elder often noted. Quote, "We will go through storm after storm. This is how it will be for some years to come. An overall state of turmoil everywhere." The second volume consists of 5 parts. The first part refers to the sense of indifference and irresponsibility prevailing in our time, and to the compelling duty of conscientious Christians to ease the situation through self-correction, prudent behavior, confession of faith, and prayer. At one point, the elder noted, "I am not saying that we should take up banners and march in demonstrations, but that we should raise our hands toward God in prayer." In the second part, the elder kindles the zeal for spiritual work without confining us to a particular struggle. It is then up to each person to take up the struggle according to his own strength and philotimo, and to live the life in Christ, which is paradise on earth. Footnote on philotimo. According to Elder Paisios, is the reverent distillation of goodness, the love shown by humble people, from which every trace of self has been filtered out. Their hearts are full of gratitude toward God and their fellow men, and out of spiritual sensitivity and a sense of honor, they try to repay the slightest good which others do for them. To continue. The third part refers to the short occupation period of Satan, which will give Christians the opportunity to witness to Christ again, as in holy baptism, but conscientiously this time, to struggle against evil, to rejoice in advance for the victory of Christ over Satan. The elder used to say that the saints would have envied this opportunity of ours. Many saints would have wanted to live in our time in order to take up the struggle earnestly, but it is now up to us, and we are unworthy. At least we should recognize our unworthiness. Effectively confronting the present situation requires the cultivation of a heroic spirit, as well as the spirit of selfless sacrifice. In the fourth part, which addresses divine providence, faith, trust in God, and divine assistance, we are guided toward the source from which we can draw the strength to confront any adversity. Lastly, the fifth part focuses on the need for and the power of heartfelt prayer, a mighty weapon in combating the ever-increasing evil around us. The monks and nuns are called upon to be in an unceasing state of alert, much like soldiers in time of war, constantly helping the people with prayer and carefully preventing the distortion of the spirit of monasticism, and thus leaving a leaven for future generations. This last part concludes with a chapter that defines the most profound meaning of life, while reiterating the need for metania, for a change of direction, a change of mind, that is, repentance. In this volume, and as always, the counsels and the activities of Elder Paisos are weighed in the scales of discernment. In these texts, one may see the elder deeply immersed in prayer, even as pilgrims knocked at his cell, ringing the brass bell hanging outside his wire fence and shouting impatiently, persistently, "Yerunda, stop praying for a minute. God will not be offended." At other times, he will abandon the desert and go out into the world, as otherwise his absence from some common activity could be misunderstood and harm the church. Or we may see him overcome by righteous indignation in reaction to someone's blasphemies, while at other times he will remain silent and simply pray for the blasphemer. Given this, the reader should not rush to conclusions until all the chapters have been carefully studied. Above all, the reader should not isolate any of the counsels of the elder and take them out of context, for this can lead to erroneous conclusions. The reader must always keep in mind that the elder is speaking about a particular event or a specific question and is responding to a specific person, the salvation of whose soul is in the balance. Those who knew the elder remember the gentle consolation his words brought to their hearts, no matter how harsh his counsels may have been sometimes. The reason was that the elder always aimed at healing the evil, not at stigmatizing it. He wanted to deliver the soul of his counselee, not expose the passion to public ridicule. These very same words, when used outside this context of pain and love, may be easily misconstrued and perhaps prove to be untherapeutic. Instead of delivering divine consolation and security to our hearts, his words may arouse doubt and fear, or may even lead one to extremes, when in fact the elder was neither a man of extremes nor one-sided. He wanted to see good done, but properly, for people's benefit. Of course, he never hesitated to speak the truth, yet the truth was spoken with discernment. He would be overcome by righteous indignation at the desecration of anything sacred, and would even announce the formidable events that were to take place. But his demeanor never caused fear and agitation in others. On the contrary, he conveyed the hope and the joy of the resurrection, a joy that stems from the selfless sacrifice that relates one to Christ. And as long as one is related to Christ, by participating in the sacramental life of the Church and observing his commandments, one has nothing to fear, neither devils nor tortures. In his characteristically graceful manner, the elder said at one point, "When you set yourself aside, Christ is by your side." Christ, after all, is the very one we seek in all of our spiritual life. And this is where he points out a danger a Christian often encounters. If he does not cultivate the spirit of sacrifice, he cannot become a communicant in the life of Christ, and remains with a mere external formality without an inner life. The frequent references to the personal life of the elder may trouble some readers, particularly when he seems to relate rather easily certain divine experiences of his. However, in putting the spoken word into writing, it was not possible to convey the difficulty with which the elder spoke about himself, nor the pressure exerted in order to convince him to share some of these personal experiences. In fact, sometimes a certain event was related in installments to various nuns and with different details. And when the opportunity arose, we attempted very hesitantly to extract any additional information that would complete the narrative. Thus, in the course of 28 years, during which the elder spiritually guided our sisterhood, he revealed for our benefit a few of the divine events in his life, which proved to be for us a spiritual blood transfusion. This is why he was greatly saddened when the spiritual progress which he expected was not achieved. He would sometimes say with pain, "I am spreading fertilizer on sand." We thank those who reviewed these texts prior to publication and expressed their respectful thoughts on the counsels of the elder, and who also encouraged us to press on with this effort, since, as they told us, the counsels of the elder are directed to all the members of the church. May the counsels in the volume Spiritual Awakening, through the prayers of the blessed Saint Paisios the Hagurite, who, as many do ascertain and confess, is always watching over us, and who succours us with divine love, instill in our hearts a good concern, so that we may struggle with Philotimo, so that evil will retreat, and the peace of God will prevail upon earth. Amen. The Dormition of the Theotokos, 1999. Signed the Eurondis of the Holy Hezekiah Mother Philothei, and the sisters with me in Christ. An introduction to the Elder's Counsels. Yerunda, how do you see things going? How do you see things going? What can we say, Yerunda? You tell us. The present calm worries me. Something is up. We haven't quite understood what times we're living in, and we don't even consider that we will die someday. I don't know what will happen. The situation is very difficult. The world's fate is in the hands of a few, but God is still holding the brakes. We need to do a lot of praying with pain and love for God to intervene. We need to take matters seriously and live spiritually. These are very difficult times. Much ash and trash has fallen. There's great indifference. A very strong wind is needed to blow them away. The old-timers used to say that the time will come when people will start kicking. All barriers are discarded and nothing is respected. It's terrible. Everything has become Babylon. We must pray for people to come out of this Babylonian captivity. Read the prayer of the three young men. The prayer of Azariah and the hymn of the three young men is an addition to the book of Daniel, inserted between chapter 3, verse 23, and chapter 3, verse 24, found in the Greek Septuagint version. Read the prayer of the three young men to see how humbly they prayed. Read Psalm 83. O God, who will be compared to thee? Be not silent, neither be still, O God. We have to do this, otherwise we struggle in vain. We need divine intervention. Now, certain European sicknesses have come into the mix and they keep getting worse. A Cypriot family man who lived in England once told me, "We are in spiritual danger. I must take my family away from England." Over there you can see a father taking his daughter, a mother her son. Everyone is crowned in marriage. Everyone is blessed. I am ashamed to even mention some of the things that are going on. But we don't lose any sleep over them. Now, I'm not saying that we ought to take up banners and go marching in protest. But we should turn our attention to the great danger ahead of us and raise our hands to God in prayer. We must defend ourselves against evil. We must put on the brakes because it seems some are trying to demolish everything. This is the time to repeat the verses from the psalm. Make their nobles like Oreb and Zeb, yea, all their princes like Ziba and Zalmunna, who said, "Let us take to ourselves in possession the pastures of God." Psalm 82, verses 12 to 13 from Septuagint. To continue. There is great confusion. Everything is in a whirl, making people dizzy. People are like bees. If you strike the beehive, the bees will swarm in frenzy. They'll start buzzing around, and then what they do depends on the wind. If it's a north wind, they'll go back into the beehive. If it's a south wind, they'll fly away. It's the same with people. They're constantly buffeted by a national north wind or a national south wind. They're dizzy. Even so, in spite of all the turmoil, I do feel a sense of consolation, a certain sureness. The olive tree may have dried up, but it will sprout new shoots in time. There are some Christians upon whom God relies. There are still people of God, people of prayer, and the benevolent God endures us and will provide again. These people of prayer give us hope. Do not be afraid. As a nation, we have survived many tempests, and we were not lost. We shouldn't be scared of a brewing storm. We shall weather this too. God loves us. Man holds within him a hidden power for times of need. The difficult years will be few. They'll only be a passing storm. Now, I'm not saying these things to scare you. I just want you to know where we stand. For us, it's a great opportunity to celebrate the hardship, bear witness to our faith. Be with Christ, abide by his commandments, and pray to have divine powers in order to face any hardship. Forsake sinful passions, and divine grace will come. Something that will greatly help is to have a good concern. Where are we? What are we going to encounter, so that we take the proper measures and are prepared? Our life needs to become more temperate. We need to live more spiritually. We need to love one another more. We need to help the suffering, the poor, with love, with compassion, with kindness. We need to pray that they'll all turn out to be good people. God will provide the solution. Our benevolent God will provide in the best possible way, but we need to be very patient and careful. You see, often when people are impatient in unraveling a spool of thread, they only manage to tangle it even more. God disentangles patiently. Things won't be like this for long. God will sweep it all away. Around 1830, when a large contingent of the Turkish army was on the Holy Mountain, for a period of time there were no monks in the monastery at Hebron. All the fathers had left, some with the holy relics, others to help in the Greek Revolution. Only one monk would come from afar to the monastery to light the vigil oil lamps and sweep. As the Turkish troops were both inside and outside the monastery, this poor monk would sweep and say, "My Panagia, what is going to happen with this situation?" One day as he was praying to Panagia with pain in his heart, he saw a woman approaching. It was the Panagia, shining and with a radiant face. She took the broom from his hands and said to him, "Give me the broom. You don't know how to sweep well. I will sweep." She swept the floor and then disappeared into the sanctuary. All the Turks were gone for 3 days, and Panagia had sent them away. God will throw out whatever is not right, just as the eye gets rid of a foreign body. Satan may be working, but God is working too, and he will turn evil into good. Take broken tiles. God can take them and turn them into a beautiful mosaic. So don't worry, God is above everything and everyone, governing all things, and will call on each of us to give account for our actions, and we will each receive our just reward. Those who aided others will be rewarded, and those who caused harm will be punished. Ultimately, God will order things aright, but each one of us will have to account for what he did during these difficult years, with our prayers and kindnesses. Faith is under attack today. The stones of faith are being removed one by one to bring down the edifice. But we're all responsible for this destruction, not just those who remove the stones and destroy the building, but also those of us who sit back and watch the building fall and do nothing to shore it up. Whoever pushes someone toward evil will be held accountable to God. But our neighbor will also be held accountable for seeing this evil done to a fellow human being and for doing nothing about it. People will easily believe someone who has the gift of persuasion. People yet are like wild beasts. I have no complaints against wild beasts. You see, animals cannot do much harm as they lack the ability to think, whereas a man who wanders far from God becomes worse than the wildest beast. He can do so much damage. The strongest vinegar is made from spoiled wine. The other, artificial vinegars, are not as strong. The worst of all is when the devil forms an alliance with a perverse human being. That's when he can do twice as much harm. Just like carnal thoughts, when they ally themselves with the flesh, they do the greatest harm to the flesh. For the devil to work with such a person, he must be of some importance. He too must have evil intentions and be evil himself. Then, God forbid, these people will cause great harm. They'll threaten others, harm monasteries. The church and monasticism will be a threat to them because they'll upset their plans. The present situation can only be confronted spiritually, not in a worldly manner. The storm will worsen, discarding more trash and junk, but then everything will be sorted out. That's when you'll see some receiving their fair share and others paying their debt. Things will work out in such a way that no one will be complaining over the misfortunes they will experience. But, needless to say, neither will they be saying, "Glory be to you, dear God." Oh, how God truly loves us. The things that are going on now, these words were spoken in June of 1985, and the things people are planning on doing, if they had occurred 20 years earlier, when people had greater spiritual ignorance, the situation would have been far worse. Now people are more aware. The church has become stronger. God loves people. They're His creation. He will provide for all their needs as long as they believe and observe His commandments. Cursed is the man who does the work of the Lord with slackness. Jeremiah 31:10 from the Septuagint. To continue. In the old days, if a believer worried about the state of the world, he was thought not to be right in the head and was destined for confinement in the tower, a tall defensive structure built into the monasteries of the Holy Mountain and used to ward off pirates. Today it's just the opposite. A believer is destined for confinement in the tower if he's not concerned for and doesn't feel pain over the prevailing conditions in the world. You see, in the old days, those who governed the world had God in them, whereas today many of those who govern have no faith at all. Nowadays, many of them are trying to destroy everything: the family, you, the church. Today, when one is concerned over the condition of our nation, then that's a confession of faith in itself, because the state is opposing the divine law. It's legislating laws that are contrary to the law of God. There are also some who are completely indifferent. They don't believe in the church and they don't recognize the nation either. To have their peace of mind, they say, St. Paul himself teaches that one should not be concerned about the affairs of the world. And they just don't care. But that's not what St. Paul meant. During his time, the pagan nations were in power. Some people severed their ties from the state and turned to Christ. Since they had become soldiers of Christ at a time when the whole world was pagan, St. Paul's message was, don't get involved in affairs of the state, 2 Timothy 2:4. However, when St. Constantine the Great came to power and Christianity prevailed, the great Christian tradition was gradually established throughout the churches, the holy monasteries, and through art, the rule of faith and worship, and so on. As such, we have a responsibility to maintain all of these traditions and not allow the enemies of the church to abolish them. I've even heard spiritual fathers advising their spiritual children, don't get involved in affairs of the state. Now, if they had attained such a high level of sanctity through prayer that they didn't care about anything worldly, then I would be the first to kiss their feet. But they're only indifferent. They don't want to rock the boat. Indifference is unacceptable even among worldly people, even less so among spiritual people. An honorable spiritual person should do nothing indifferently. The prophet Jeremiah exhorts us by saying, Cursed is he who does the work of the Lord with slackness. Let us give spiritual comfort to the people. In the old days, 6 out of 10 people were truly God-fearing, 2 somewhat so, and the other 2 indifferent. And even they still had some faith in them. Today, it's not like that. I don't know where all this is going, but I do know that we must now try to help people spiritually with all our might, just like in the old days during the Great Flood with Noah's Ark. We must now try to save some from being spiritually maimed. This has to be done with great care. It will take a lot of discernment to see things from many points of view and try to comfort people spiritually. You think it's of any comfort to me to have so many people coming to my door, or that I want to see so many people? No, I don't. But under these conditions, these poor people need a little help. The reason I didn't become an ordained priest was so that I wouldn't have to deal with people. But now I'm far more involved with them. Yet God knows my disposition and gives me far more now than he would have if I were only to do what suited me. Often I have asked Panagia to provide for me a faraway and peaceful place where I wouldn't see or hear anything, where I could pray for the whole world. But she won't listen. But when I pray for insignificant things, Panagia does listen to my prayer. I realize that now, when I am about to have to see a lot of people, God nails me down with an illness so I can get some rest. He doesn't give me that sweetness of prayer I used to have in the past, because if he did, I wouldn't be able to pull myself away. When I had it, it was very difficult to pull myself out of that spiritual condition when someone came to my hut, to my cell. Kalivi. Footnote: the elder, following an intense spiritual experience of his love for God and man, felt himself melting like a candle in a warm place. He then realized that he could not refuse his help to others. From then on, he devoted the daytime to the people who came to visit him, while at nighttime he was devoted in prayer to the various problems of the world. However, when the number of the faithful who came to visit him increased dramatically, he thought of retiring to unknown places where he could devote all his time to prayer. Then, for a second time, he received the call to remain in his Kelion dedicated to the little Panagia, Tanaruda, and to provide spiritual comfort to the people. To continue. There in my cell, I became a program for the people. As I'm inside reading the Psalter, they're outside knocking on the door. I tell them, in 15 minutes, and they shout, "Hey, Father, stop praying for a minute. God won't be offended if you do." That's how far they go. It's not only that I'll interrupt my prayer, but if I go outside, it's all over. I have to manage to finish all I can before then. By 6:30 in the morning, I have to have finished even my daily vespers in order to manage. So for me, it's like, "O morning light of the holy glory." By the time you finish your orthos, I'm already done with the komboskini of the vespers. If I get a chance to have some anditeron in the morning, all's well and good. Afterwards, I can't even get a cup of tea. I'm dead, ready to collapse. Even during Bright Week after Pascha, I had to observe the 9th hour and the 3-day rule. That is, abstention from food and drink until the 9th hour, 3 p.m. by Byzantine reckoning, or for 3 days. Whether you can or not, you must do it. One day, I don't know what obstacles people faced. Maybe there was a storm at sea and there was no boat, but no one showed up in the sun. Oh my, I had a day like those I used to have on Mount Sinai when I lived in the cave of St. Episteme. The elder lived an ascetic life in the cave of St. Episteme on Mount Sinai during the years 1962 to 1964. So, you see, when the sea has a storm, I have calm. But when the sea is calm, then I have a storm. I could, of course, go somewhere on retreat. Do you know how many have offered to cover the expenses and send me to California or to Canada? You must come, they say. We have a Hezekiah there. If I should find myself in an unfamiliar place, it would be like I was in paradise. Nobody will know me, and I will have my rule to live as a monk, as I desire. But you see, a soldier is discharged only after the war is over. Now we are at war, in a spiritual war. I must stay at the front lines. There are Marxists, Masons, Satanists, and so many others. There are so many who are possessed by demons, anarchists, suffering from delusions, and they come to me asking me to bless their beliefs. And there are so many sent to me by others without any preparation, some only to get rid of them, and others so that they won't be the ones to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. If you only knew how hard-pressed I am from so many directions. I'm so embittered by others' pain, but I feel consolation in my heart. If I were to go away, I'd see it as a retreat, abandoning the front line. It would be betrayal. That's how I see it. It's not as if I set out to do these things or help the monasteries. I started out for one thing, and now I find myself doing something else. And how must I struggle? And you see, no one else is reacting. Who cares if people are trying to destroy the church? They'll tell you, oh, it doesn't matter. They're like feathers in the wind, so long as they are comfortable. How can they possibly be comfortable? They'll be made comfortable by Satan in the end. These are not honorable things. If I wanted to do what pleases me, well, you know how easy that would be? But the point is not to do what pleases me, but to do what pleases and brings consolation to others. If I were to think about my own ease and comfort, I could find a myriad of places and ways of doing that. But in order to enter the will of God, you have to be a doer of God's will, and not merely a servant of yourself. Part 1. The responsibility of love. The way of the church is love. This differs from the manner of the legalists. The church sees everything with forbearance and seeks to help each person, no matter what he may have done, no matter how sinful he may be. Chapter 1. The Indifferent Generation. Indifference to God breeds indifference to everything. What's that noise? It's an airplane, Yonder. Close the window, we don't want it coming in. The world has gone so mad even that could happen. Everything's falling apart. Family, education, public services. People don't care about anything. They are empty. Whose fault is it that we've come to this? I'm speaking in general terms. I just want to show you how indifferent people are. Go to any school and you'll see. For example, if open windows are banging in the wind, it's doubtful that even one child will care enough to shut them so that they don't break. Some will gape. Some will just sit back and watch them rattle, while others will merely pass by as if nothing has happened. Indifference. An army officer who was in charge of the oil depot used to tell me, I'm having a hard time finding a soldier to place on guard duty at the depot. One who will be responsible enough to keep others from starting a fire or be sure that he himself won't throw a cigarette. There is a half-hearted spirit, no manliness about it. We have completely gone bad. I wonder how God tolerates us. There was so much dignity in the old days. There was philotimo, great sacrifice. During the war in 1940 at the frontier, the Italians would sometimes have an encounter with the Greek guards and would visit their guard posts. And to see the philotimo of the Greeks? Once, when the Italians went to a Greek guard post, the Greeks offered them some coffee. One of the Greek officers took a handful of money out of his pocket, 50 and 100 drachma notes. And this money was worth something back then. And he set them on fire in order to boil the coffee. He wanted to show the Italians that Greece was a rich country. The Italians were impressed. See the spirit of sacrifice? Nowadays we have been permeated by a spirit that one finds in communist countries. In Russia, even though they had an abundant crop this year, this was stated in 1990, there will be great hunger among the people. They did not harvest the grain on time. They went to harvest in the autumn. Is harvesting ever done in autumn? But if the crop is not their own, how can they ache enough for it to go and harvest? Their life is a drudgery. They don't have the drive to go and create something because for so many years they were not free to create. There it goes with an idle spirit, with this indifference. The whole country is sinking. Is it raining and the wheat is spread out? They don't care. Is it time to leave work? They leave work. The rain washes the harvested wheat away. The next day, they will go to work on time and gather what is left of it. But when the wheat is your own and it's spread out on the threshing floor, if it should rain, would you ever leave it to be lost? No. You lose your sleep in order to save it. And even though you're so very tired, you feel joy. You feel delight. Indifference towards God leads to indifference toward everything else. It leads to disintegration. Faith in God is so very important. When man worships God, then he loves his parents too, in his home, his relatives, his work, his village, his whole region, his state, his fatherland. But he does not love God or his family, isn't capable of loving anything. And of course, he doesn't love his country either, which after all is but one big family. What I'm trying to say is that everything stems from faith in God. When a person does not believe in God, he doesn't care about his family, his village, or his country either. And all of these values are now falling apart. And this is why there is a spirit of indifference and idleness. A police officer wrote to me, "I couldn't come because I had a lot of work to do. There's only 2 of us covering an area that is supposed to be covered by 8. You see what's happening? Instead of assigning 2 more policemen, they're leaving only 2. Fortunately, there are exceptions. Once a father came to me and said, "Pray for my son, Angulo, because they're going to kill him." I had known his son, who was serving in the military at the time since childhood. "Why, what's wrong?" I asked him. He said he found the others playing cards when they should have been on duty. He reprimanded them. They didn't listen. Then he went to report them, and one of them threatened to kill him. "Look," I said, "they're not going to kill him, so don't worry about it. But I will pray for Angulo so that they do not court-martial him for not playing cards with the others." I learned something else and said, "Glory be to God, there are still some Greeks who care about their country." An Air Force pilot had attempted to overtake some Turkish planes who had violated Greek airspace, to take pictures in order to prove it. The others from the ground radio communications told them, "Let them go, don't bother." But he insisted and kept trying to overtake them. In the meantime, the Turkish pilot with the bigger airplane was flying faster and lowered his altitude, leading the poor Greek pilot to fall into the sea. And there are others who simply fly around in their airplane. What a difference. One has to grasp the real meaning, to have a need to do what is good and right, otherwise all is idleness and indifference. You can't possibly force someone to go fight in a war. He'll be looking for ways to run rather than fight. But once he understands what harm the enemy can do, then he'll volunteer to go. People today are so self-centered. In the old days and for us in my homeland, people used to say, "If you have some work that needs doing, don't leave it for tomorrow. If you have some good food, save it for tomorrow when a visitor might come." Nowadays people think, "Let's leave work for tomorrow when someone might come to help us, and let's eat the good food tonight." Today most people are self-centered. They think only of themselves. Let's say it starts raining very heavily. You'll see that most of you will start thinking of whether you have laundry hanging on the clothesline and will hurry out to pick it up. This is not a bad thing, but our thoughts do not go any further. Even if they get wet, clothes will dry again. But what about those people threshing their harvest? Do you feel for them, offer them a prayer? Or when lightning strikes? It is doubtful if a handful of people will think of the farmers or those who have greenhouses. People do not think of others. They don't go beyond themselves. Their thoughts constantly revolve around themselves. But when they revolve around themselves, they have themselves at the center, not Christ. They function outside the axis, which is Christ. In order to be able to think of others, the mind must first be with Christ. Then one can also consider the neighbor, the animals, and all of nature. His radio station is working, and as soon as a message is received, he runs to help. If our mind is not on Christ, the heart is not working, and as such we love neither Christ nor our fellow human beings, not to mention nature, the animals, the trees, the plants. By living this way, you will never reach the point of having communication with the birds, the animals, the birds. If a bird were to fall from the roof, you would feed it. But if it does not fall from the roof, you do not think about feeding it. When I look at the birds, I say to myself, the poor birds need to be fed, and I throw some crumbs. I leave out some water. I see diseased branches on the trees, and I immediately think of cutting them off so the rest of the tree doesn't get infected. Even when a door or a window is banging, that's where my thought goes. I will forget myself if I shouldn't be needing something at that moment, and will tend to the door or the window so that they will not be damaged. I might think of myself as an afterthought, and if someone thinks and cares about the other creatures, how much even more must he think and care about their Creator. If man does not live like this, how will he ever communicate with God? Even when you simply go out, take a look around. Someone may have carelessly or maliciously, and I do hope no one would do that, thrown something to cause a fire. So take a look around. This too is a spiritual act. For even a glance can bear love. When I come out of my hut, my cell, I take a look downwards and I take a look toward the roof to see if something is burning. Unless, of course, one has such faith that if something does catch fire, prayer alone will put out the fire. Otherwise, one must take action. Also, if I hear an explosion, I pay close attention to see what it is. Is it a gun? Are they practicing? Is it a blasting charge? My mind runs immediately to such concerns, so that I may direct my prayer with the Kumuskin. One who disregards himself out of love for others will have the great care of God, and all people will care for him. But today's generation is the generation of indifference. Most people are only for the parades. If something were to happen, don't even try telling them to defend themselves. And nowadays they don't like parades either. In the past, at least, people would go to the parades, listen to a marching tune, and something would stir inside them. Today we Greeks are idle and lack discipline. Of course, other nations are even worse, without any ideals. You see, the Greeks may have a whole lot of faults and blemishes in their character, but they have one gift from God, philotimo and bravery. They celebrate everything. Other nations do not even have these words in their vocabulary. We have a responsibility. This was related in 1992. An atheist to the bone had come to my hut once. After going on and on, he finally told me, "You know, I am an iconoclast." He believed in nothing, and yet he claimed to be an iconoclast. So I told him, "You godless fellow, how can you talk to me about being an iconoclast when you believe in nothing?" At the time of the iconoclastic controversy, footnote, iconoclasts were those Christians who refused to render honor to the holy icons. The iconoclastic controversy had thrust the Byzantine Empire into turmoil for more than a century, from the year 726 to 843. It was resolved at first by the Seventh Ecumenical Council in 787, which condemned it as heresy. Rekindled by Emperor Leo V the Armenian, the controversy was finally settled by Patriarch Methodius in 843. To continue. At the time of the iconoclastic controversy, some Christians fell into error through excessive zeal and went to the other extreme. But then the church resolved the issue. It was never a matter of not believing in God. He then went on to support the present situation. And then I really became angry with him. How can the present situation be acceptable to you? I told him. Judges afraid to judge, indictments against criminals withdrawn because someone or another threatens them. Who is running the country? Are you comfortable with this situation? If you support such people, you're a criminal yourself. Why did you come to me? Get out of here. And I sent him away. Yarand, aren't you afraid to speak like that? What is there to be afraid of? I've already dug my grave. If I had not dug my own grave, then I would be concerned about the person who would tire himself digging it. As it is now, someone only has to throw in a few shovelfuls of soil. I have in mind another atheist, a blasphemer, who has said the most blasphemous things about Christ and the Panagia. One who is permitted to appear on television. Even the church does not take a stand to excommunicate some of these people. Such people should be excommunicated, but the church seems reluctant to do so. Yaranda, what would be accomplished with an excommunication when these people do not believe in anything anyway? It will at least show that the church has taken a stand on the matter. Yaranda, is the silence of the church an indication of approval? Yes. Someone wrote some blasphemous things about Panagia and no one spoke up. Then I told someone, did you see what so-and-so has written? And he told me, well, what can you do with those people? You'll get soiled if you try to deal with them. They're afraid to speak up. What did he have to fear, Yaruba? That people might write something about him and ridicule him in the press. And so he tolerates blasphemous things about Panagia. We want others to pull the chestnuts out of the fire so that we can have our peace of mind. This indicates a lack of love. Then man begins to act out of self-interest. This is why we see an all too familiar spirit today. Get to know so-and-so because he will then speak well of you. Be on good terms with so-and-so and he will not speak badly of you. And so forth. After all, we must not be taken for fools. We must not become victims. Another person remains indifferent and does not speak out. I do not speak out, he says, so that I won't be written up in the newspapers. In other words, most people are completely indifferent. For a long time, no one would write anything, but now some little effort is being made. Years ago, I had scolded someone on the Holy Mountain. You are over-patriotic, he retorted. Not too long ago, he came back to find me and say, they have destroyed everything, family, education. And I in turn told him, you are over-patriotic. This whole situation has led to one bad thing and one good thing. The bad thing is that indifference has overtaken so many people who used to have something in them, but who now just say, who am I to solve the situation? The good thing is that many people who are beginning to be troubled and to change for the better. Some even come to me and seek to justify a bad thing they did previously because they're now troubled by it. Yaranda, are we then always to confess our faith? Discernment is needed. There are times when we should not speak out, and other times when we should confess our faith, courage, otherwise we will bear a responsibility for not speaking. During these difficult years, each one of us must do whatever is humanly possible. Whatever is not humanly possible, leave it to God. This way we will have a clear conscience that we did what we could. If we do not resist these evil things, our ancestors will rise up from their graves against us. They endured so many hardships for the homeland. What are we doing for it? Greece, Orthodox Christianity, with her sacred tradition, her saints and heroes, is under attack by the Greeks themselves, and we do not speak out. It is a terrible thing. I told someone, why don't you speak out against what so-and-so is saying? And he replied, what can one say? That person is totally depraved. If he is totally depraved, all the more reason to speak out and strike him down. They do nothing. They let him go on with his depravity. Actually, spat at one of the politicians in disdain. Say at least that you do not agree. Be forthright. Your attitude is that as long as you're all right, everything else can be ruined. If Christians do not confess their faith, if they do not react, such people will do even worse things. But if they react, then they'll think twice about it. but I suppose many Christians nowadays are not made for battles. The early Christians were tough nuts. They transformed the world, and during the Byzantine period, if even one icon was removed from the churches, the people rose up in protest. Here Christ was crucified so that we may be resurrected, and we remain indifferent. If the church does not speak up so as to avoid a conflict with the state, if the metropolitans do not speak up in order to be on good terms with everybody, and especially with those who help them and with the church foundations, if the monks of the Holy Mountain do not speak up for fear of losing their subsidies, who's going to speak up? I told one of the abbots, if they threaten to cut off your subsidy, tell them, we will then no longer provide hospitality to the pilgrims, so that they will think twice about that. The professors of theology also do not speak out against these abuses. They reason, we're civil servants. We will lose our salary, and how are we then to live? In the meantime, the monasteries have been caught up with the pensions. Why do you suppose that I do not want to receive even the small pension from the farmers' insurance fund? It is not honorable for a monk to be insured as a farmer. To be insured as an indigent? Yes, I can see that. It honors the monk. But to be insured as a farmer? Why? A monk has disclaimed fat pensions, abandoned the world, come to the monastery. To receive a pension? We betray Christ for a mere pension. Yet is it acceptable for a nun who may have worked as a teacher for some years to receive her rightful pension? Well, that's all right, but let me tell you, by giving this pension where it is needed, the nun will receive a good pension from Christ. I see what awaits us, and I am troubled. The years pass, and what difficult years they are. Our troubles are not over. The cauldron is boiling. If one is not strengthened spiritually, how can one face a difficult situation? God has not created human beings who are good for nothing. We must cultivate our philosophia. Indeed, if a great shake-up were to come upon us, God forbid, how many would remain standing? Before the 1940 war in Konitsa, where I had the carpentry shop near the marketplace, the villagers used to bring corn and wheat and so on. When these villagers would bring their corn to sell at the market, some wealthy people, who were not really wealthy, but they did earn a small interest on their deposited money, would kick the sack and disinterestedly ask how much it cost. But when war came and they had to sell everything they owned in order to survive, these same people would come to the market, and when the villager said, "Good morning," they would ask, "Have you any corn to sell?" This is why you should thank God for all things. Tighten your belt a little and become frugal. I see what awaits us, and I am troubled. Do not allow yourselves to get slack. Have you any idea what Christians are going through in other places? This was a footnote stated in 1987. In Russia, they are still in labor camps. What hardships they have to endure. There are no books for spiritual edification. And what about poor Albania and the great misfortune there? They don't even have anything to eat. Churches and monasteries have all been shut down. People even had to change their names so that they don't sound Christian. Even in America, the Orthodox Christians are few and scattered in different places. Do you know what they're going through? Without an Orthodox community, they have to take the train miles and miles away just to go to church. Some come to the Holy Mountain to seek spiritual guidance. It is a great ingratitude on our part to have such an inverted spirit prevailing in Greece. God will reveal many saints in the countries where communism was in power, martyrs who chose death. They held important positions but could not agree with laws contrary to the law of God. I cannot agree with this. Kill me, throw me into prison, they would say, so that the others would also not be misled. Here in our country, without having to, so many are showing such great indifference. It would be different if they were going through some hardships, a war or difficult years, but now it's as if nothing is going on. How should one say this? It's like someone arriving from Australia by airplane to Greece in the springtime and then departing for Australia. autumn, only to arrive there in springtime again. They go from spring to spring, with no winter in sight, no sense of cold and heavy weather. Yanada, how can we help a person who's indifferent? We need to instill in him the good concern, the good restlessness, perturb him so that he'll want to do something to help himself. It cannot be done by force. A person must be thirsty before you can give him water. Try giving food to someone who isn't hungry. He will throw up. When the other person does not want something, I cannot deprive him of his freedom, his free will. Ignorance is not justifiable. Yaranda, is it possible that some people are different because they're simply ignorant and uninformed? What ignorance? Let me tell you about a case of ignorance. A literature teacher from Halkidiki did not know what the Holy Mountain is. A German teacher spoke to him about the Holy Mountain and they came together for a visit. The German man even knew how many monasteries there are on the Holy Mountain. And even though a Protestant, he also knew about the sacred relics and where each one was. Now, is such ignorance justifiable among our people? Another person from America advised someone from Halkidiki again to come to help me with the problem he was having. From America, mind. Let me tell you something else. Someone came to my hut from Florina. I asked him, "Are you from within Florina?" And he said, "Yes, from within the city." So I told him, "You have a very good metropolitan player." Then he asked me, "What football team does he play with?" He thought I was talking about a football player. He was so immersed in the game of football that he didn't even know the local bishop. At least Augustine Cantiotis is a well-known bishop. Such ignorance is not justifiable. No, ignorance cannot be justified in the world today. What is missing is philotimo, the good disposition. He who has the good disposition of coming to know Christ will come to know him. He will make a turn and come to meet him. And even if there is not a theologian or a monk to teach him the word of God, as long as he has good disposition, he will make the turn to Christ either from an encounter with a snake or a wild beast, or from a lightning, from a storm, or some other event. God will provide the means. A young anarchist had gone to Germany. There he was confined to a reformatory because he got involved with drugs. He had no help from anyone. In the reformatory, someone gave him a New Testament. He read it and immediately changed. He said, "I will go to Greece. That's where orthodoxy is." He returned to his village and his relatives were intent on finding him a wife. He got married and had a child. He continued to read the New Testament, go to church, observe the fasts and the feasts. The others who saw him live like that said, "He must have gone crazy to be reading the New Testament." After a while, his wife abandoned him, took the child with her. When his wife left him, he left everything he had in the village, fields, tractor, and so on, and went to live in a ascetic, in a cave. A spiritual father, however, advised him to go find his wife first, talk with her, and then decide what to do. So he set out for Thessaloniki to find his wife and child. He believed, since the spiritual father so advised him, that Christ would reveal her. Christ did not reveal his wife in Thessaloniki. In the meantime, he found some Germans and instructed them in the faith. One of them was baptized. The Germans paid the fare for the young man to go to Athens to seek his wife there, but he did not find her there either. Again, someone helped him to go to Crete. He started working there and went to see a spiritual father. When the spiritual father heard his problem, he told him, "Is your wife and child like this, like that? There is a woman working here who arrived recently." And he described the woman to him. "She must be the one," the young man said. The father informed her, and as soon as she looked upon her husband, she exclaimed, "How did you find me? Are you a sorcerer? Did you find me with the help of sorcery?" She turned away and left him again before they could even begin to talk. He lost her for a second time. He heard about me, and he came to visit me in my cell. He knocked once and waited. He stood to the side doing prostrations until I opened the door. He was wearing old and worn clothing. He told me the whole story. I had some dry figs and offered them to him. "Do you want some figs?" I asked him. "I have no teeth," he replied. "I don't have any either," I told him. "Are you in pain?" he asked me, and added it. "I am in pain, and out of pain comes the joy of Christ." I asked him again, "Do you want a sweater?" "I have two," he said, "and if the weather warms up, I will give one away to someone." Then I told him, "Until you clear up the situation with your wife, you must take care of your health, because you have a responsibility to your child, too." Such self-denial, such faith that young man had. He wasn't yet 27 years old. Imagine if he had come to know the monastic life. He had total ignorance, but he had also a good disposition, and God helped him to make profound evangelical progress. This is why I say that ignorance cannot be justified in any way today. Only if someone is mentally deficient or a small child can he be justified for being ignorant. But then again, even little children today are so bright. If one really wants to, there are many opportunities to learn the truth. Chapter 2. The presence of a Christian is a confession of faith. Do the various movements, demonstrations, and protests carried out by Christians have any positive results? The presence of Christians is now a confession of faith. Someone may be of more help to prayer, but his silence will be exploited by others who will say, "So-and-so did not protest, therefore he is on our side, he agrees with us." If some of us do not begin to strike back at evil, to reproach those who scandalize the faithful, greater harm will be done. The faithful will be somewhat encouraged, and at the same time those who are attacking the church will be somewhat hindered. The church is not their boat to go sailing with. It is the ark of Christ. And those who attack the church are censurable. They are only interested in having big salaries, expensive cars, and entertainment. And then they make laws for civil marriages. They legalize abortions. As to what God will do, that is another matter. And with the blasphemous movies being produced these days, they want to ridicule Christ. Essentially, they're saying, that's who Christ was, but now will come the real Messiah. Then they go on to present their own Messiah. This is what they seem to be aiming at. People, believe these things and are harmed. Those already harmed are harmed all the more. People believe these things because they want to justify the unjustifiable and to ease their conscience. With all this blasphemy, they're seeking to justify moral and spiritual disorders. They have overdone it. They filed a lawsuit against the movie The Last Temptation of Christ. Footnote: the blasphemous movie The Last Temptation of Christ, directed by Martin Scorsese, was shown for a short while in theaters of Athens in 1988. The storm of protests and demonstrations created by the faithful and the Church of Greece forced the theaters to stop showing it. The elder, in spite of the pain he endured from his hernia, came out from the holy mountain, together with other monks, to be present at the demonstration in Thessaloniki and to support the faithful people with his presence. To continue, they filed a lawsuit against the movie The Last Temptation of Christ as being blasphemous to the Christian religion, and the public prosecutors said, "Oh, it is nothing. Such blasphemies had not been heard before." For us, to protest against that blasphemous movie was a confession of faith. Of course, with all these blasphemous things, there also comes a good thing. The wheat is separated from the chaff. People are passed through the sieve. Are there issues which we as individuals or as groups should defend, and other issues which we should not? When you, for example, were called a heretic, you responded, but with other criticisms, you kept silent. This is the consensus of the Holy Fathers, and not my own opinion. Any other accusation helps me in the spiritual life, while the accusation of being a heretic separates me from Christ. People are being lulled to sleep. With everything that is going on in the world today, how can people get some help? The one who really desires to be helped can indeed be helped through insignificant things. For example, a vigil oil lamp is seen moving back and forth, but the person himself is shaken by an earthquake and he recovers from his indifference. Those who do not believe in the first place become worse when they hear that a war will break out or some catastrophe will take place. Let's have a good time now, they reason. Life's too short. So they pull out all the stops. In the past, even the indifferent ones could recover and change their way of life when a war was about to break out. Now such people are very few. In the past, our nation lived spiritually, and God would bless it, and our saints helped us overcome our enemies, who were always more numerous than us. Today we say that we are Orthodox Christians, but unfortunately we often only have the name Orthodox, but not the Orthodox way of life. Once I asked a spiritual father who was active in society and had many spiritual children, what do you know about a blasphemous movie? I know nothing about it, he told me. He knew nothing about it and yet was guiding so many people in a big city. People are being lulled to sleep. They want people in the dark, carefree, having a good time. One must not dare to speak about an impending war, or that we must prepare ourselves for the second coming. God forbid that we should cause the people to worry over such things. It is like some old ladies who say, "Don't talk about death. Talk only of joyful things and baptisms," as if death is not waiting for them too. So they have a false sense of joy. On the other hand, if they were to think about the aged man down the street who died yesterday, or the other one who has come to an end of his life and will soon die, or that a memorial service is being held the day after tomorrow for someone much younger than they, then they might be inclined to think about death and say, "I must go to confession, prepare myself spiritually, for Christ may call me soon to the other life." Otherwise, death in time will take them unprepared. Some others, again, out of supposed kindness, give the following advice. Don't tell the heretics that they are in error. Show them love. So everything is leveled. If these people had lived during the early years of Christianity, we wouldn't have had a single saint. In those years, Christians were told, just throw some incense in the fire for the emperor and do not deny Christ. And they would not accept this. Just pretend you're throwing incense. Again, they refused. Don't talk about Christ and go quietly to some other area. Again, they did not accept any compromise. But today one sees so many lukewarm people. Yet when the Apostle Paul writes, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, in Galatians 5:22, does he mean that joy is an indication of a proper life? Yes, because there's worldly joy and divine joy. When something is not spiritual, pure, there cannot be true joy and peace of heart. The joy experienced by a spiritual person is not the worldly joy sought by many today. Let's not mix things up. Did the saints have the kind of joy we are seeking today? Did Panagia have such joy? Did Jesus go around laughing? Which saint has gone through this life without pain? Which saint had the joy sought by many present-day Christians who do not want to hear anything unpleasant, who do not want to worry or lose their serenity? If I do not want to worry or be troubled so that I may be happy, if I do not want to lose my serenity so that I may be meek, then I am indifferent. Spiritual meekness and meekness out of indifference are two different things. Some people say, I must be cheerful because I am a Christian. I must be calm because I am a Christian. Such people are not Christians. Do you understand? That is indifference. It is worldly joy. One who has these worldly elements is not a spiritual person. A spiritual person is a mass of pain. That is to say, a spiritual person is pained over circumstances, over people, but is compensated for this pain by divine consolation. He does feel pain, but inside he also feels divine consolation, for God is pouring blessings from paradise. and man is overjoyed with divine love. This is the joy, the spiritual joy, which is not expressed but rather abounds in the heart. The example speaks. Yerunda, should people living a spiritual life in the world let others know that they're fasting? When it is the prescribed times of fasting, such as Wednesdays, Fridays, and the other Lenten seasons, then we should, because it is a confession of faith. The other ascetic fasts, that is those which are undertaken for the love of Christ or for our prayer and petition to be heard, those should be practiced in secret. Our goal is to live in an orthodox way, not simply to speak or to write in an orthodox way. This is why, you see, a sermon does not inform, does not change the life of a person, no matter how good it is, unless the preacher is actually living the faith. Yet under what happens if the one who hears or reads a sermon has a good and open disposition? Well, then he already has divine grace, and that's why he can benefit from such a sermon. One who does not have this good disposition, however, will take and examine what the preacher is saying, will not receive any spiritual benefit from it. It is relatively easy to think in an orthodox way. To live the orthodox way of life requires effort. Once, a theologian gave a talk urging people to go and donate blood because there was a shortage, and indeed many were motivated to go and donate blood. However, he himself did not donate even a single drop, even though he had plenty. The people were then scandalized. But he responded by saying, by speaking to the people and motivating them to donate blood counts as if I had given much more. Thus, he was able to ease his conscience. It would have been better if he had not given the talk, but gone to donate a little blood of his own. One's life is what counts. I am a rightist, someone told me, who had no relationship with the church whatsoever. If you do not even make the sign of the cross, how can that be of benefit to you? I told him. A hand that does not make the sign of the cross has no particular benefit for being the right hand. How does it differ from the left hand that does not make the sign of the cross? If you are a rightist and you do not make the sign of the cross, how do you differ from the leftists? The goal is to be a spiritual person living close to Christ. Then you can be helpful to others as well. When a person lives aright, then his work will inform others. A certain Protestant lived in a city and was critical of everybody, the clergy, the bishops, everyone, without exception. Not far from there, a certain monk lived an ascetic life in a monastery. At one point, an atheist asked the Protestant, "All right, you criticize all the bishops and all the clergy. What do you have to say about that monk?" "Him I accept," he said, "because he differs from the others." A faithful person who lives authentically will be of benefit to others, no matter where he may be. I remember a friend of mine who served as a policeman on the northern borders. In the area there were some Serb communists who were real atheists and committed members of the party. When Serb priests came to the Greek-Serbian border, the policemen would kiss their hand. The communists noticed this. A Greek policeman was kissing the hand of Serb priests. This made an impression upon the communists, and they reconsidered the issue of faith. How helpful are those people who have an important position and uphold the faith and traditions? This is why I try to see some important people when they come to me. I want to help them because they in turn can help others with their good example. There is a field marshal I know who is such an example. Whatever he does is from within, from the heart, not superficial. Others who observe his way of life question themselves and are benefited. In the past, the local leaders had principles. They believed. You know what a prominent lady had said to a parliamentary in the city? She had attended a dinner with her husband during the Dormition fast, and there was fish and meat on the table. She wasn't eating because she was keeping the fast. The parliamentarian noticed her and made the familiar remark, "The sick and the travelers need not keep the fast." "Oh yes, especially those traveling with ease in their car, she replied, and did not touch any of the non-Lenten food. Meanwhile, there was also a clergyman at the same dinner who addressed the group by saying, "It is my honor to be here with you this evening," and going on and on with endless praises and compliments. At one point, the clergyman was interrupted by the husband of the notable lady with an appropriate verse from the Psalms. Psalm 145, verse 3. "Put not your trust in princes, in a son of man in whom there is no salvation." The clergyman had obviously gone there to flatter the guests. On another occasion, the same lady had said to a university professor of theology, "Please do not fuss too much over minor details and fail the priests in their examinations. Try to help them pass their examinations because there is such a great need for priests in the countryside." The point I want to make is that in the past, local officials and leading members of our society were interested in the church and served as an example for the people. What will have a positive impact on people today is our Christian example and our Christian life. Christians should be distinguished by spiritual heroism, nobility, sacrifice. This is why I tell lay people, love Christ, be humble, do your duty, and Christ himself will reveal your virtue to others. Virtue has a rule of its own by which it will reveal a person wherever he may be. Even if one should conceal himself or even pretend to be a fool for Christ's sake, virtue will definitely be revealed, even at a later time, and the stored treasure, revealed altogether at last, will again help many souls, perhaps then even more. God endures us. Today, God is tolerating the state of affairs. He tolerates and tolerates, so that the evildoers will be unjustifiable. There are circumstances where God intervenes directly and immediately, while in others he waits. He does not provide the solution immediately and waits for the patience of the people, their prayer, their struggle. God demonstrates such nobility. There's one who had killed so many back then during the war, and yet he is still living. God will tell him in the other life, "I allowed you to live much longer than the devout people." He will be allowed no mitigating circumstances. Yet, why is it that sometimes such people do not die even though they're very sick? It seems they have had some grave sins, and for this they do not die. God is waiting and giving them time to repent. What about the people they harm? The innocent who are harmed receive credit, but those who are guilty are paying off debts. Yet, what is meant by the phrase evil men and impostors will go on from bad to worse, deceivers and deceived? Footnote 2 Timothy 3:13. Look, there are some people who have some egoism, and God gives them a slap so that they will lower themselves a little. Others have a little more egoism, and God gives them a slap so that they'll lower themselves even more. But those who have satanic pride, God leaves them alone. It may appear that they are prosperous, but what prosperity is that? It is a dismal prosperity. And afterwards, they do not simply fall down, they go directly into the abyss. God save us. The defense of justice. Yet one of the hymns says, arousing a most righteous anger. What anger is most righteous? A footnote, a phrase in the Apostolion hymn among the praises for the feast of the Holy Fathers of the First Ecumenical Council. To continue. When others are being wronged and someone shouts in anger out of a real sense of pain and suffering, then that is a most righteous anger. When he is angry because he is wronged, then that is not pure anger. When you see someone suffering for the sake of sacred things, he has divine zeal. This is how you can understand one who has become a fool for Christ. For example, if you take an icon and place it upside down before him, the fool for Christ will react with great agitation. That's how you can put him to the test. In other words, there is a righteous, divine indignation, and only this indignation is justifiable in man. When Moses saw the people sacrificing to the golden calf, he got very angry and threw down the tablets of stone, commandments given to him by God, and they broke. Phinehas, the grandson of the high priest Aaron, had committed 2 murders, and yet God established a covenant whereby the perpetual priesthood of Israel would derive from him and his descendants. When he saw the Israelite man Zimri sinning with the Midianite woman Hosbi before Moses and all the Israelites, Phinehas could not control himself. He rose and slew both of them, putting an end to God's anger. Had he not slain both of them, the wrath of God would have befallen all of the people of Israel. Footnote, Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 to 15. What a fearful thing. When I read in the Psalter the verse, "Then Phinehas stood up and interposed, and the plague was stayed." This is Psalm 105, verse 30 from Septuagint, to continue. I kiss his name many times. Even Christ himself, when he saw in the temple courtyard merchants selling calves, sheep, doves, and the money changers, took a whip and drove everybody out. John chapter 2, verses 14 and following. When a spiritual person tries to defend himself indignantly in a personal matter, this is clearly selfish, an act of temptation. Such a person is subject to external demonic influences. If someone is being wronged or ridiculed, others should defend him for the sake of justice, not for their own self-interest. It is not right for you to quarrel on your own behalf. It is, of course, another matter if you react to defend serious spiritual matters that relate to our faith, to orthodoxy. You have a responsibility to do this. When you are thinking of others and you react in order to help them, then this is a pure activity because it is prompted by love. When I was at Mount Sinai, I would go down to the monastery each week, or every 15 days to receive Holy Communion. One time, a very simple dikaos, a footnote, in the Holy Monastery of Mount Sinai, dikaos is called the person responsible for the Holy Assembly when the Archbishop is not present in the monastery. To continue. He was there, he told me, not every week. Monks should receive Holy Communion only 4 times a year. At that time, they had a rule not to receive Holy Communion frequently. I used to wear the monastic hood, and he said no monastic hood either. They only wore it during the feasts. I said, may it be so, with your blessing. So I put it over my shoulder like a scarf and gave it no further thought. Was I to quarrel over this? In the meantime, I would prepare myself for Holy Communion and attend the Divine Liturgy. When the priest said, with fear of God, faith, and love draw near, I would bend my head and say, you know, my Jesus Christ, how much need I have for Holy Communion. And I would feel such a transformation, which I do not know that I would have felt had I received Holy Communion. After a number of months passed, several young men came to the monastery, urged by me to come to Mount Sinai. They too were told not to receive Holy Communion frequently. Well, then I spoke up, and the matter was properly settled. Facing up to abusive insults. Yet the sacred scripture says that blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is not forgiven. What is this blasphemy? Footnote Matthew chapter 12, verse 30. Blasphemy against the Holy Spirit is in general disregard for holy and sacred things, provided, of course, the person is sane. Then he's guilty too. For example, to one who told me, get out of here, you and your gods, I gave a hard shove because that was blasphemy. Or 2 people are passing by a church. One of them makes the sign of the cross and urges the others to do the same. But he resists. I will not make the sign of the cross. Such contempt is blasphemy. Thus it is impossible for blasphemy to exist in a devout person. But even impudence is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. The impudent person distorts or disobeys, for example, an evangelical commandment in order to justify his fallen state. Such a person does not respect the truth, reality, but knowingly distorts it and tramples upon a sacred object or principle. Such an attitude gradually becomes constant. In time, the grace of God is lost, and the person is subject to demonic attacks. If he does not repent, the consequences he is to bear. God forbid. But if one becomes angry and blasphemes even against the Holy Spirit, this blasphemy is not unforgivable. It is not something he actually believes, but something he said in a moment of anger when he had lost control, and immediately repents. The impudent, however, will justify the lie in order to justify his fall. Whoever justifies his fall justifies the devil. Yarında, how does someone justify his fall? A person may recall something said 10 years ago in a very different context and present it as an example to justify himself. Not even the devil himself, the greatest legalist, could conjure up something like that at that moment. And how does such a person feel? How does he feel? He never has any rest. If even someone who is in the right does not find peace when attempting to justify himself, you can imagine the person who is not in the right and who is trying to justify his fall in a most impudent manner. For this reason, we must be careful to avoid any impudence and scorn, not only of sacred things, but also of our neighbor, who is an image of God. Impudent people are at the first level of blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. Those who despise and scorn sacred and holy things are at the second level. At the third level is the devil himself. Yet when people speak against the church or against monasticism and so on, what should one do? First of all, if someone speaks badly about you as a person, this does not matter. Just remember, Jesus, who was God himself, would not speak out when abused and reviled. What do I, who am a sinner, deserve? If people came to abuse me as an individual, it would not trouble me at all. But when they abuse me as a monk, they also abuse the whole institution of monasticism. For the monk is not independent, and therefore I must speak up. In such circumstances, we should give people a little time to have their outburst, and then tell them a few things. Once a lady on the bus was being abusive about priests. I gave her time to have her say, and when she had finished, I said, "We have expectations of our priests, but we forget that God did not send them down to us with parachutes from heaven. They are human beings with human weaknesses. But can you tell me, a mother like you, all painted up with cosmetics and fingernails like a hawk's, what kind of child will she bear and raise? And if this child were to become a priest or a monk, what will he be like?" I remember on another occasion when traveling from Athens to Vienna by bus, a man was talking incessantly about a metropolitan who had at that time created certain problems. I told him only 2 or 3 words and then continued to pray in silence. He just went on with his abuse. When we arrived in Vienna, I took him aside and told him, "Do you know who I am?" "No," he said. "Then how can you say such things? I could be far worse than the person you are reviling, or I could be a saint. How can you sit there and say terrible things which I cannot imagine even worldly people doing? Try to correct yourself from being so abusive to others. Otherwise, you will receive a strong slap from God. For your own sake, of course." After that, I noticed he began to tremble. Even the others around us understood, as I realized from the commotion that followed. You see, people abusing and reviling holy and sacred things, and others not saying anything. Being meek on such an occasion is demonic. Once, when I was coming out of the holy mountain, I met on the boat a poor man who had left a psychiatric hospital and come to the holy mountain. He was constantly ranting and cursing all the prominent people in government. At the hospital, "For so many years now, they've worn me out with electric shocks and behavior-controlling drugs. You monks have it good here with your comforts, your cars. From 12 years old, my mother sent me to an island. For 25 years, I've been going from one psychiatric clinic to another. He continued to blame all the political parties. Then he started being abusive. Christ, Panagia. Then I got up, went to him and said, "Stop, right now." Then I asked, "Are there no people in authority here?" Apparently his escort was offended. He must have been a policeman. And he calmed him down a little. He had expressed all his problems with loud, abusive outbursts. I felt sorry for him. Later he came, kissed my hand. I too kissed him. He was right. All of us, more or less, have our share of responsibility. I too was in part the cause for this poor man's abusive talk. Had I had the necessary spirituality, perhaps I could have made him well. At the time of the exchange of populations following the Asia Minor catastrophe, the people of Farasa were very sad on the boat bringing them to Greece. Two sailors were arguing and cursing Christ and Panagia. This was unbearable to them. Greeks, Christians, cursing Christ and Panagia? They grabbed the two sailors and threw them into the sea. Fortunately, they knew how to swim and were saved. When an ordinary person is being abused, we should support and defend them. How much more so when Christ himself is reviled. Once a young man who was lame, came to my hut, but his face was aglow with extraordinary light. I thought to myself, something is going on here for divine grace to be so obvious. I asked him how he was, and he told me what had happened. Someone, a big and strong man, was abusive of Christ and Panagia, and the young man rushed upon him to stop the abuse. But the abuser put the young man down and beat him, crippling him and leaving him lame. He was a confessor. Oh, what suffering was endured by the confessors and the martyrs. Yet unto some devout young men are troubled while serving their military duty by those who are abusive and curse, which they do. This requires discernment and patience. God will help. The wireless operator that I worked with in the army was a blasphemous, unbelieving doctor. Every day he would come to the administrative unit to brainwash me with his ideas. He talked to me about Darwin's theory of evolution and other such things. Things entirely blasphemous. But after a particular event, he began to understand a few things. Once, we were on a mission, and we had loaded the wireless equipment in the carrier on a large mule. On a downhill and slippery path, I was holding on to the mule's tail, and the doctor was pulling on the reins. Suddenly, as the carrier slightly touched the animal's ears, the mule gave a strong kick with its hind legs and threw me with force to the side. As I recovered, I realized that I was still walking. The only thing I remember is shouting, "My Panagia!" Nothing else. The mule's hoofs were imprinted on my body. My chest was all black and blue. The animal had kicked with such force. The doctor was very surprised to see me walking. We continued on our mission. A little further on, the doctor lost his footing on a rock, fell, could not get up to walk. He started shouting, "My Panagia, my Christ, what will become of me? Who will help me?" He was afraid of being captured. "Don't worry," I told him. "I will stay with you. If they capture me, they'll capture you." The poor fellow then started thinking. Arsenios, footnote, this was the name of Saint Paisios in the world before becoming a monk, as baptized by his new known Saint Arsenios the Cappadocian. To continue, even though the mule kicked him, Arseni, even though the mule kicked him so hard and threw him flying, did not suffer a thing, while I, who merely lost my footing, am now unable to walk. After a while, he got up with difficulty, and I helped him as he limped. The others in the unit had moved ahead. The doctor got a good lesson that day. Every day, he was shouting his blasphemies without restraint. And then, at the time of danger, he started shouting, "My Panagia, my Panagia." Panagia was now convenient for him. Another person, a motorcyclist in the army, had broken his leg twice, and still he continued to curse the abuser. Couldn't you tell him something yet? What could I tell him? Here, I was telling him nothing, and he was constantly cursing Christ and Panagia on purpose, just to annoy me. Once I realized that, I only prayed. As you know, while at first he and others cursed for no good reason, later when they experienced some difficulty and were about to curse, they would bite their tongues. When someone is cursing, blaspheming, or being impudent, it is better to pretend to be busy and not listen than to say the Jesus prayer. For if he sees that you are paying attention to him, he may continue to curse all the more, and you can then become a cause for his demonic influence. If, however, one is not impudent, but is conscientious and curses out of a bad habit, you can say something to him. If again one is conscientious but has a great deal of egoism, you must be careful not to speak sternly to him. Rather, you have to be as humble as you can and speak to him with pain. What does St. Isaac say? Confute those who dispute with you by the strength of your virtues, and not by the persuasiveness of your words. By the meekness and quietness of your lips, put the impudence of the obstinate to silence. Reprove the wanton by the nobility of your life, and those who are shameless as regard the senses by the modest curbing of your eyes. Footnote: St. Isaac the Syrian's ascetical homily. Chapter 3. To the pure, all things are pure. Titus chapter 1, verse 15. The spiritual person is a consuming fire. Yet how can someone live a proper Christian life in today's society without being scandalized by those who live far from God? Why should anyone be scandalized by others who do not live close to God? If you were in a family with 6 or 8 siblings, and 1 or 2 of them were led into error by Satan to live a sinful life, would their sinful life scandalize you? No, I would grieve, for they are my brother and sister. Well then, the evil is within us. We have no love, and for this reason we do not consider all people our brothers and sisters, and are scandalized by their life. We are all one big family, and are brothers and sisters among ourselves, for we are all children of God. If we truly feel that we are brothers with all human beings, we will care for those living in sin, and will not be scandalized by their sinful life, but instead will pray for them with pain. Therefore, if we are scandalized, the evil is within us, not outside. When you feel scandalized, you should ask yourself, how many do I scandalize? In God's name, shouldn't I tolerate my brother or sister? How does God tolerate me with all the things that I do? Think of God, of Panagia, the angels, who look upon all the people of earth, as if standing on a balcony and looking down on a plaza. They see some stealing, others fighting, still others sinning carnally, and so on. How does God tolerate them all? How is it that He can tolerate all the evil and all the sin on earth, and we cannot tolerate even one brother or sister? It is awful. Yet under what does St. Paul mean when he says that God is a consuming fire? Deuteronomy 4:24 and Hebrews 12:29. If you throw papers, trash into a furnace, what will become of them? Won't they be burned up and consumed? It is the same with the spiritual person. Whatever temptation is thrown at him will be burned up and consumed. A consuming fire. When the divine fire lights inside man, everything is burned. No evil thought can stick to him. In other words, the devil will hurl at him all kinds of evil thoughts. But the spiritual man is a fire that burns them up, in which case the devil grows weary of doing this and eventually stops. This is why St. Paul the Apostle also writes, "To the pure, all things are pure." The pure see everything as pure. There is nothing impure. Even when thrown into the mire, the pure will remain pure, like the rays of the sun, which no matter where they fall, remain bright and pure. The spiritual person is transformed for the better by the saint, and is not irritated by the carnal person. He sees a carnal person and feels pain for him, but suffers no harm. Another person who is in a moderate state of spirituality is transformed for the better by a truly spiritual person. However, he is also transformed by a carnal person, but this time toward evil. A carnal person cannot distinguish a saint and is provoked by another carnal person. And while the possessed sees the saint and flees, the carnal person approaches the saint in order to tempt him and to scandalize him. One who is debased to the condition of the sodomites is scandalized even by the angels. The humble person, even when inexperienced spiritually, can distinguish the angel of God from the devil, because he has spiritual purity and is related to the angel, whereas the egotist and carnal man, besides being easily beguiled by the cunning devil, transmits cunningness himself, provoking with his carnality and harming the weaker souls with his spiritual germs. Yet, how does one reach the spiritual state of being able to see everything as pure? The heart must be purified, so the grace of God may find a place to rest. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Isn't that what is written in the psalm? When a man or a woman's heart is purified, then Christ comes to dwell in it, and then they no longer scandalize others, nor are they scandalized by others. Rather, they transmit grace and reverence. The person who is careful to maintain his spiritual purity also preserves divine grace. Then he sees everything in the light of purity and is also able to utilize the impure for good in spiritual purposes. This good work of spiritual transformation is accomplished in his good and spiritual factory. Unless papers are turned into clean and useful paper napkins, writing pads, and so on, old and broken bronze objects are turned into candlesticks and candle stands. In contrast, the person who accepts deviousness and thinks deviously will turn even good things into bad. Like the factories which make ammunitions, they turn even gold into bullets and shells because that is what their machines are made for. When someone starts making concessions to sin, he darkens inside. The eyes of the soul are clouded. He can no longer see clearly. Moreover, he is polluted by sin, and sin confuses and entangles him, causing him to see even the pure as sinful. There are people who cannot believe, for example, that some young people live pure and chaste lives. It's impossible for such a thing to happen today, they say. These poor souls are so immersed in sin that they see everything as sinful. People who sleep with the demons. Tangalakia. This is how the elder often referred to the demons. People who sleep with the demons cannot imagine that others are sleeping with little angels. But we must not expect the swine to be respectful of the lovely lilies. You see, even Christ said, "Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before the swine, lest they trample them under their feet." Matthew 7:6. For this reason, anyone trying to live a truly pure and spiritual life must be very careful never to be too bold before worldly people, or allow that they are spiritually in the right, because they can do much harm and also be harmed themselves. Keep in mind that worldly people have another rule and another canonarch, and they cannot tell the difference between the holy myron and ordinary perfume. Yet can someone who wants to live close to Christ be hindered by external temptations? No, only our lack of a spiritual life can separate us from Christ. This is the work of the demon, to create scandals and to spread evil all around, to attack people sometimes head-on and at other times deviously. Christ loves us and is close to us when we live according to his will. For this reason, when you see scandals being created, do not be afraid and do not panic. If someone does not face up to reality in a spiritual manner, he will not enjoy a single day. For the devil will find his mark, that is his weak point, and will constantly create scandals against him. Today one thing, tomorrow another, the day after that yet another. We ourselves should not create scandals. As far as possible, we should be careful not to give cause for ugly situations to develop. Let us not open cracks to the deceiver, because the souls who have faulty thoughts are harmed and are only seeking an opportunity to justify themselves. Then we end up building with one hand and tearing down with the other. Some time ago, some young modern men came to my hut, and we had a discussion. That day I was planning to go out from the holy mountain. When they learned of this, they too decided to leave the mountain and came and sat beside me in the boat. They were asking me with great interest about various spiritual matters. However, some people on the boat misunderstood this and were looking at us suspiciously. If I could have foreseen that others would misunderstand our conversation, I would have taken measures to prevent it. People are devious. We must be careful not to create scandals. We are not responsible for what we cannot take measures to prevent, or for matters in which we have no experience. But we must not expect a reward from God when we create problems through carelessness. We have a reward when we are careful, but the enemy creates problems nonetheless. Someone tells me, for example, that I am in error. First, I will see if I am in error or not. I think to myself, for him to say that, he must have seen or heard something. He cannot just say that without any reason. He must have misunderstood something I said or did. And I try to find out where or how I have been misunderstood in order to correct it. If he says that I am in error, a sorcerer, this is a gain for me, as people will not come to me, and I will find some peace. But that poor man who says such things will be condemned because he harms the church. Isn't it a pity? And I am to blame because I was careless about something. Some people come to kiss my hand, and in an effort to avoid it, I pat them lightly on the head. One who sees that says, "Look, he is blessing them when he is only a monk. What does he think he is, a priest?" It's not their fault. I should be careful not to do it again. Yet when someone out of carelessness creates a scandal, some people make the remark, "Leave him alone. He has the excuse of not being responsible for his actions." The excuse of irresponsibility applies only to one who cannot think, not the one who is careless. The careless person lights a fire and does not think that where he has lit it can cause a forest fire. When from time to time such a person lights a fire and singes a few other souls in the process, we have a duty to pray and pour a pail or two of water onto the fire. Also, there are others who are headstrong. They are pious to a fault, and when they hear something they disagree with, they react violently, without first examining if it is right or wrong. It is then that we must sometimes discreetly step on the brakes, and again when they stop, discreetly jam a stone against their tires to prevent them from rolling backwards and running over other souls. What scandal mongers some people are. Do not readily believe everything you hear, for there are some people who relate things as they themselves understand them. Once someone went to Haji Epinethus, St. Arsenius of Cappadocia, and told him, "Give me your blessing, Father Arsenius, because 100 snakes have gathered up there." 100 snakes? Where could they have possibly come from? Father Arsenius wondered. Well, if they were not 100, then surely there were 50. Wow, 50 snakes! There were at least 25, for sure. Again the saint wondered and asked, "Have you ever heard of 25 snakes coming together? Stop it right there, it is not possible." Then he said there were certainly 10. Really, they were having a conference and 10 snakes got together. There had to be 5, the man said then. 5? Well, maybe just 2. Then Father Arsenius asked him, "Did you see them?" "Well, no, but I heard them in the bushes making a loud hissing sound." "So it could have been some lizard." I try to never draw any conclusions from whatever I hear until I've had a chance to examine the matter. Some people may say something to criticize, others may simply be relating a story, while yet others may relate it with an ulterior motive. What scandal mongers some people are. In Konitsa, there were two friends who were very close. On holy days and Sundays, they didn't wander around the town, but instead came to visit the monastery in Stomium. They also enjoyed chanting. Afterwards, they would take a hike up the mountains to the Camel, the mountain peak, footnote on the mountain peak on the Pindos range, which has the appearance of a camel's hump. To continue. One day, a perverse individual sowed discord between these two friends. He went to the one and said, "Do you know what your friend said about you? He said this, he said that." Then he went to the other man and told him, "Hey, do you know what your so-called friend said about you? He said this and this, that. Soon after that, the two men had an awful argument right in the monastery. In the meantime, the instigator left the area, and the two men continued to argue terribly. The younger of the two was rather hot-tempered and started calling the older one names. Right then, thinking to myself, look what temptation can do. What shall I do now? I went to the older man and said, "Look, he's young and a little hot-tempered. Don't get him wrong. Apologize to him." "Father," he tells me, "how can I apologize to him? Don't you see how he's calling me names? I have no idea what he's talking about." Then I went to the younger man and said to him, "Look, he is older. Things are not as they seem to you. Go and apologize to him." But he got enraged, started shouting, "Father, you and I are going to have a fight of our own as well." "Well then, Panteli, if we must fight, let me go and get ready," I said, and went away. Outside the monastery, I had some long sticks I was planning to use for a garden fence. I walked about 400 meters and picked up a stick nearly 5 meters long and started to drag it slowly, hoping to make him laugh. He could see me dragging the stick, but could not imagine what I was going to do with it. Then I came into the courtyard holding the stick in my hands and approached the area of the narcotics. Then I said, "Come on, Panteli, now I'm ready for our fight." And I poked him with the stick. That was it. Both men burst out laughing. The ice was broken. The devil went away, defeated. What foolishness was this? Are you fellows in your right mind now? I told them, and their friendship was restored. Was the slander spoken on that same day? Oh, yes, they were swearing at each other terribly. See what the devil can do? The other fellow was probably jealous of them for their wonderful friendship, so he slandered the one to the other and then went away. Slander is truly evil, and this is why this type of temptation is called by the name of the tempter, that is, the diabolus, the devil. Footnote, calumny, slander in Greek is diabolo. Continue. He says one thing to one person and something else to another person in order to deceive and sow discord. And you see how even good friends can believe the lies and be caught in the devil's snare. Did that individual spread the lies about the two friends intentionally? Yes, to separate them out of love, namely envy. The publication of sins. When we see something unseemly, it is better to cover it rather than make it a matter of public scorn and ridicule. It is wrong to publicize moral transgressions. If some foul-smelling waste material is found along a path, a prudent person will make some effort to cover it with a stone to prevent any further disgust. But an impudent individual, instead of covering it, may begin stirring it and spreading its foul smell even more. By the same token, when we indiscreetly publicize the sins of others, we bring about great harm. The scriptural verse, "Telleth unto the church," Matthew 18:17, does not mean that everything must be made public. because today not everyone is part of the church. The church is the faithful who live as Christ desires, not those who oppose the church. The verse, "Tell it unto the church," had that particular meaning during the early years of Christianity, when confession of sins was performed publicly before all the members of the church. In our time, when hardly a family can be found to have the same spiritual father, let us not be fooled by the devil with the otherwise meaningful verse, "Tell it unto the church." For when we publicize a moral transgression, we make it known to the enemies of the church, giving them opportunity to oppose the church, thus shaking the faith of the weaker members. A mother who has a daughter who is a prostitute does not calumniate and ridicule her in front of others, but rather does everything in her power to restore her daughter's name. The mother will sell whatever she can to raise money. She will take her and go to another city. She will help her to get married in order to correct her former way of life. This is precisely the church's way. The benevolent God tolerates us with love and does not expose anyone, even though He knows the decadent condition of our heart. The saints, too, never embarrassed a sinner before other people. Instead, through love and spiritual sensitivity, they quietly tried to rectify and overcome the evil. We, however, even though we are sinners, do just the opposite, like hypocrites. We must be careful not to be easily shocked and think that whatever others do is evil. Yaronda, you referred to the publication of moral transgressions. What about other types of sins or sinful conditions? Is it necessary under certain circumstances to make them public? Let me explain. I do this to some of the people I know. For example, I see someone doing something bad and scandalizing others. I tell that person 1, 5, 10, 20, 30 times to correct himself, but he doesn't. He has no right to continue his disorderly behavior after being told repeatedly, as others will be misled and imitate him. You see, people readily imitate evil, not the good. So then I have to tell others who see this bad behavior in order to protect them. In other words, when I say what so-and-so is doing does not please me at all, it's not to condemn the person. I've already told him that so many times, because there's others who see his bad behavior are influenced and might imitate him. They may even say, well, since Father Paisios does not tell him anything, it must be all right. If I do not speak out that I am not pleased with this bad behavior, I give the impression that I am blessing it, that it pleases me. But then the whole is destroyed, for people will consider that particular behavior as acceptable and worthy of imitation. And what can come from that? In the meantime, they think that I have not spoken directly to the person about this matter. They have no idea that I have struggled with this matter for such a long time. And we also have the devil adding his share. It's all right if you do it. Look, that other person is doing it, and Father Paisios has not told him a thing. So when I see that someone continues his bad behavior, even though I've repeatedly asked them to correct him, I will make it a point of mentioning to anyone who knows him that so-and-so's behavior does not please me. And this I do, as I have said, to protect the innocent from evil influence. This is not condemnation. Let's not confuse the two. Now some will come and say to me, why did you tell this to others? It was a secret spoken in confidence. What secret? What confidence? I spoke to you 1,000 times and you did nothing about it. You have no right to harm others who may think that I agree with such behavior. When harm can come to others, I have an obligation to speak up, and God forbid if I do not, especially when I am dealing with a young person from a family I happen to know, and I see that his behavior is destroying the family. I tell him, look, if you do not correct your ways, I will speak to your mother. You have no right to come and tell me, and then to continue as you please. I will speak to your mother in order to protect your family. Now, if he feels repentance, that is all right. But when he continues his disorderly conduct, I must speak up. I have a responsibility to do so. Chapter 4. actions with prudence and love, cultivating ourselves. If you want to help the church, it is better to try to correct yourself rather than be looking to correct others. If you manage to correct yourself, one small part of the church is immediately corrected. Naturally, if everyone did the same, the body of the church would be in good health. But today, people concern themselves with anything but themselves. You see, judging others is easy, whereas working on yourself takes effort. If we work to correct ourselves and look more intently toward our inner activity rather than our external, giving precedence to divine help, we can in turn be of greater and more positive help to others. We will also achieve an inner serenity that will quietly help the souls of the people we encounter. Because spiritual serenity reflects the virtue of the soul and transforms souls. When someone applies himself to external activity before having polished his spiritual inner state, he may struggle spiritually, but he will be fraught with worry, anxiety, lack of confidence in God, and frequent loss of serenity. If he does not improve himself, he cannot say that his interest for the common good is pure. When he is liberated from the old self and all things worldly, then he will receive divine grace and be not only at peace with himself, but also able to bring peace to everyone else. But if he has not received the grace of God, then he can neither govern himself nor help others in order to bring about a divine effect. He must first be immersed in divine grace, and then utilize his resulting sanctifying powers for the salvation of others. Good deeds must be done in a good way. Yaranda, how do you think when you have to deal with a problem? I think of what is humanly possible and what isn't. I examine it from all perspectives. I will do this. What consequences will it bear on this, on that? What good can it bring, or what harm can it cause? I always try to see a problem from many aspects, so the solution I come up with will be, as far as possible, the correct one. Many mistakes can be made if one is not careful. If one realizes that afterwards what should have been done, it is of no benefit because, as people say, the bird has flown. Let us say, for example, someone was being careless and burned a house. Well, perhaps no one will hang the man, but the damage has been done. People had a problem somewhere. The person in charge came to me and said, well, now the problem is solved. I went and found so-and-so, I told them this and that, and the matter is now settled. I said to him, the problem has just started. What you had in your hands was not a problem. Now the fire is really burning. At first, there were just 2 pieces of coal burning that would have burned out by themselves. That person thought that through his actions the problem had been solved, and even expected to be praised. Whereas with what he did, he created a big fuss that magnified the problem. It takes a lot of attention, prudence, and discernment, because good must be done well and be of benefit to others, otherwise it may demonize them. Also, if there's something that you're thinking of doing, allow the thought to mature before doing it. If you act prematurely in haste, you may later have other problems to torment you. The serious issues, when delayed a little, will later proceed properly and efficiently. Someone may be clever, but he may have vainglory and egotism, negative qualities that run ahead of his actions and lead to carelessness. For example, a hunting dog, even if not purebred, will find the rabbit if it advances carefully. On the other hand, a purebred dog with all the necessary qualities, if too hasty, will run left and right without any results. Action before thought contains pride. One must not be in a hurry to act. One must first think and pray before acting. When prayer comes first, then it is not the froth of the mind. It's frivolity, but the sanctified mind that will guide the process. Spiritual people sometimes act as if there were no God. We do not allow God to act. God knows how to work. While there are spiritual means to solve difficult circumstances, we try to act by worldly means. When I was at Mount Sinai, every Friday, a Muslim cleric would go up to the minaret of a mosque at the monastery and cry out the call to prayer. What a loud voice he had! I could hear him all the way up to the hermitage of Saint Episteme. Later, the monastery found a way to prevent this by closing the door on Fridays, when the Muslim cleric would make his visit, and I knew nothing about this. One day on my way out, I saw the Hoja furious. Now I will show them, he told me, for closing the door and not letting me in. They closed it, I told him, so the camels will not get in. I don't believe they closed it to keep you out. After that, I said something to the fathers about this. One of the secretaries replied, I'll show that Muslim cleric. I'll set him up. I will tell the government that the Muslim cleric is harassing us. Look here, I said, orthodoxy is not into setups. Let's keep a vigil. Let us chant the service of the Holy Fathers of Sinai, of St. Catherine, and let us allow God to speak. I will also go up to pray. I also told a few of the fathers to pray, so that in the end the Muslim cleric received an effective slap in the face. He got up, left the area, and disappeared. For even if they had locked the door, the government would have seen that the cleric was not in fact harassing them, and they would be in trouble with the authorities. The cleric would have said that they closed the door to prevent him from entering the monastery each Friday, and this would have created a problem for the monastery. Another person in the past saw the awesome mountain and wanted to build a country home on the summit of St. Catherine. He fell ill, died, and was gone. Then another person came later to build something at the same place, but he too died and is gone. This is why we should not rely only on our own human efforts. We should pray and allow God to act. Discreet behavior. Yananda, when we see someone behaving badly, should we try to tell him something? It depends on what kind of person he is. It requires great discernment and divine enlightenment in our time. It is not easy to tell you exactly. In a given case, as I have seen, there can be 500 variables. There are some who can be corrected and others who cannot, and may even react badly to one of our remarks. Especially if someone is an egoist, and you offend him, he will react badly. While often realizing he is wrong, he won't give in because of his egotism. And when our motives are not pure, when our concern for others is tainted with pride and our love for them is not pure, then those we try to help will react badly. When we censure someone with love, with pain, whether he understands our love or not, the transformation can take place in his heart simply because we are motivated out of pure love. But censuring someone without love, with animosity, will infuriate him because our evilness collides with his pride and causes sparks to fly, just like when the steel strikes the flint. When we endure our brother out of love, he understands it. Even when our evilness is not revealed but is kept inside, he can feel it because it agitates him. This is like the appearance of the devil in the form of an angel, which causes agitation and fear, while the real angel brings a peaceful, inexpressible exaltation. In other words, Yananda, if we say something and produce an agitated reaction, are we acting from egoism? Many misunderstandings occur as well. People interpret the same thing differently. One must always examine oneself. Why do I want to say this? What are my motives? Do I really suffer over this, or do I want to appear good, to project myself? If we are cleansed and purified, then whether we become angry, or we shout, or we censure, our motives will be pure, and everything will go well, because we are acting with discernment. For discernment is purification, divine enlightenment, spiritual clarity. Consequently, how can egotism enter into that equation? And when our motives are pure, we are at peace. This is how we can distinguish whether or not our every action is good. Often you may not realize that the manner in which you say something to someone has a bossy air about it. This must be done precisely in this or that manner only. Egotism enters into the picture, and the other person explodes. If the motives are pure and there is humility, the instructive remark will be of help to the other person. Otherwise, egotism comes in and has the opposite effect. Remove yourself, your egotism, from your actions, and then you will be motivated by pure reasons. Indiscreet behavior will often do more harm than the irresponsible behavior of the insane, because the indiscreet would wound sensitive hearts with their sharp words and will often mortally traumatize them by leading them to desperation. There are some people who behave in the same manner toward everyone, but we cannot fit into a thimble what we can put into a barrel, nor can we load onto an ox as much as we can onto a horse. The ox is good for pulling the plow. It's inappropriate to saddle it and load it. The horse, again, is not meant for the plow, but to carry weight. One animal is made for one kind of work, and the other is fit for another. Let's not try to fit the whole world into our mold. Each one has his own. Let us overlook a few things when they're not harmful. If it were possible to put all the people in this life in order, then there would be no disorderly behavior, and we would have paradise here, too. So let's not have irrational expectations of others. The mark of spiritual sincerity is love. The world is in a sorry state nowadays because everyone is saying great truths, which do not correspond with reality. Sweet words and great truths have value when they come from truthful mouths, and they produce results on the well-intentioned and those who have a pure mind. Yaranda, is there a worldly sincerity and a spiritual sincerity? Yes, of course, worldly sincerity contains indiscretion. Does this mean that someone speaks in season, out of season? Not only that, truth is truth. But if at some point you speak the truth without discernment, this is not truth. For example, it is true that so-and-so is mentally disturbed, but if you go and tell this truth, you do not benefit anyone. Or another person says, in order to be sincere, I am going to sin in the public square. This is not sincerity. Anyone who has a great degree of discernment also has noble love, sacrifice, and humility, and he speaks even the bitterest truth with great simplicity, sweetened with kindness. The benefits reaped are greater than those of sweet words, as bitter medicines do greater good than sweet syrups. Truth, when used without discernment, can be criminal. Some people act in the name of truth and commit crimes. When someone has sincerity without discernment, he can do double harm, first to himself and then to others, because this sincerity is without compassion. Whoever wants to be truly sincere should start by being sincere with himself. So that's where spiritual sincerity begins. When someone is not sincere with himself, he's at least only fooling and wronging himself. But when he behaves without sincerity toward others, he sins mortally because he fools others. Yaranda, is it possible for someone to act this way out of simplicity? What simplicity? Where did you ever find simplicity in such a person? If he is a child, he'll have simplicity. If he is a saint, he'll have simplicity. If he is an adult and is not mentally retarded but behaves in this manner, he must be a devil. And how does he feel? He feels like hell itself, one temptation after another, endless temptations. Yet there's no one then to behave forthrightly. Forthrightness, as many understand and use it, has a legalistic spirit. I am forthright, they say. I proclaim upon the housetops. Footnote referring to Luke chapter 12, verse 3. And proceed to ridicule the other person, but they end up ridiculing themselves. The letter of the law kills. Footnote 2 Corinthians 3:6. Once I asked someone, what are you, a fighter for Christ or a fighter for temptation? You know that there are fighters for temptation, don't you? A Christian must not be a fanatic, but have love for everyone. Whoever hurls indiscreet words, even when he may be in the right, does harm. I once met an author who was devout and yet spoke to worldly people in a brutally frank way that was nonetheless profound, and was thus able to shake them out of their complacency. Once he told me, in a gathering I said this and that to a lady. But by the manner in which he made his remarks, he had crippled the poor woman. He embarrassed her in front of everybody. Look, I told him, you are hurling golden crowns with diamonds at people. But the way you're throwing them, you're hurting heads, not just sensitive ones, but hard ones too. Let us not throw stones at people, Christian style. Whoever censures publicly someone who has sinned, or whoever speaks with animosity about someone, such a person is not motivated by the Spirit of God. He is moved by another spirit. The way of the church is love. It differs from the way of the legalist. The church sees everything with loving forbearance and seeks to help each person, no matter what he has done or how sinful he may be. I notice in some devout people a rather strange type of logic. Their devotion and good intentions are all very well, but they also need to be spiritually discerning and broad-minded, so their devotion is not accompanied by narrow-mindedness or hard-headedness. That is, a stubborn and closed mind. The premise is to be in a spiritual state, to have spiritual discernment. Otherwise, one remains at the level of the letter of the law, and the letter of the law kills. He who has humility never takes on the air of an instructor. He listens, and when asked of his opinion, he speaks humbly. He never says I, but rather, my thought tells me, or the fathers tell us. He speaks like a student. Anyone who thinks that he can correct others thinks far too highly of himself. Yet when someone sets out with good intentions to do something only to go to extremes, does he lack discernment? Pride has infiltrated his activity, but he does not realize it because he does not know himself yet, and that's why he goes to extremes. People often start out piously, but get lost. This is what happened during the iconoclast controversy between the iconodoules and the iconoclasts. Extremes on one side, extremes on the other. The iconodoules went as far as to scrape the paint off the icon of Christ and put it into the chalice to improve Holy Communion. The iconoclasts would either burn the icons or throw them away. This is why the church was forced to place the icons high up, and once the controversy subsided, the icons were lowered for the people to venerate them and to render honor to the persons they represented.